My name is Isabella Montgomery, and I'm 24 years old. At 2 in the morning last Tuesday, I caught my stepmother Amber photographing classified Pentagon documents from my father's private safe, her phone's camera flash illuminating secrets worth $50 million. When I confronted her, she spun everything around, claiming I was the one snooping and threatening to destroy my relationship with Dad forever. The next morning, she accused me of stealing her jewelry and disrespecting her authority in our home. My father exploded with rage, grounding me indefinitely until I apologized to his precious wife for my jealous, destructive behavior. Before we dive into this unbelievable story, I'd love to know where you're watching from today. Please hit that like button if you're ready for a wild ride of family betrayal and international espionage, and don't forget to subscribe because trust me, you won't want to miss what happens when my father discovers the shocking truth about his perfect wife. Walking through the front doors of my childhood mansion after finishing my business degree at Stanford felt like stepping into a completely different universe. Every familiar corner had been transformed by Amber's relentless redecorating, replacing my mother's warm, elegant touches with cold modern furniture and abstract art that made our home feel like a sterile hotel lobby. The family portraits that once lined the hallway, showing 3 generations of Montgomerys, had been replaced with black and white photography featuring geometric shapes and empty landscapes that somehow perfectly captured how hollow our house had become since Amber's arrival. I still remember the day she first walked into our lives, appearing like a guardian angel during the darkest period our family had ever endured. Mom had been fighting breast cancer for 18 brutal months, and Dad was drowning under the weight of running Montgomery Innovations while spending every spare moment at the hospital. When his longtime personal assistant retired, the employment agency sent over this stunning 25-year-old woman with perfect credentials, impeccable references, and an uncanny ability to anticipate Dad's needs before he even voiced them. Amber Sinclair seemed heaven-sent, organizing his chaotic schedule, handling sensitive business communications, and somehow managing to bring small moments of calm to our storm of medical appointments, chemotherapy sessions, and sleepless nights filled with worry. Mom actually liked her in those final weeks, grateful that someone competent was taking care of Dad's professional responsibilities so he could focus entirely on family time. What none of us realized was how carefully Amber was studying our dynamics, learning our vulnerabilities, and positioning herself as the indispensable solution to problems she was subtly helping to create. She worked late nights in Dad's home office, claiming to organize important files and prepare for upcoming meetings. But now I understand she was actually conducting reconnaissance, photographing documents, and building detailed profiles of our family's emotional and financial weak points. The transition from grief-stricken widower to devoted boyfriend happened with shocking speed that should have raised massive red flags for everyone around Dad. Within 6 months of Mom's funeral, Amber had moved from professional assistant to personal confidant, offering shoulders to cry on during Dad's darkest moments and gradually becoming his primary source of emotional support. She accompanied him to business dinners, helped select his clothing for important meetings, and somehow convinced him that her presence was essential for his continued success as CEO of Montgomery Innovations. Montgomery Innovations had been Dad's life's work, starting as a small cybersecurity consulting firm 20 years ago and growing into a major defense contractor specializing in advanced encryption software and digital security solutions for government agencies. The Pentagon contract we'd been pursuing for 3 years represented the culmination of everything Dad had built, a $50 million deal to develop next-generation cybersecurity protocols that would protect critical military communications networks from foreign interference. Landing this contract would cement Dad's legacy and secure our family's financial future for generations, but it also meant handling classified information that required the highest levels of security clearance and personal integrity. Amber's rapid ascension from employee to wife within 18 months should have triggered security investigations, but Dad's grief and growing dependence on her emotional support clouded his judgment completely. She attended confidential business meetings, had access to his computer passwords, and gradually inserted herself into every aspect of company operations under the guise of being his trusted partner and advisor. Harrison Clark, Dad's longtime business partner and family friend, expressed private concerns about this arrangement, questioning whether someone with such limited background checks should have access to sensitive government contracts, but Dad dismissed these warnings as jealousy and old-fashioned thinking. The first serious red flags began appearing during family dinners when Amber would ask seemingly innocent questions about technical specifications, client relationships, and security protocols that went far beyond normal spousal curiosity. She'd casually inquire about employee access codes, server locations, and backup procedures while serving Dad's favorite meals and maintaining perfect conversation flow. Her questions always seemed natural and loving, framed as interest in his important work, but the specificity and strategic nature of her inquiries suggested knowledge and preparation that made my skin crawl. Late at night, I'd hear her making phone calls in what sounded like a foreign accent, speaking quietly in rapid, clipped sentences that were completely different from her usual warm southern drawl. When questioned about these conversations, she'd claim to be talking with distant relatives or old friends from college, but her explanations never quite added up and she'd quickly change the subject whenever I pressed for details. The mysterious calls always happened when Dad was traveling or working late, and she'd immediately end them if anyone appeared unexpectedly. My attempts to discuss these concerns with Dad led to explosive confrontations where he accused me of being unable to accept his happiness and move on from Mom's death. Amber's influence over him was so complete that he interpreted any criticism of her as personal attacks on his judgment and attempts to sabotage his newfound peace. She'd sit quietly during these arguments, occasionally dabbing her eyes with tissues and playing the role of wounded victim who only wanted to love our family despite facing constant hostility from his ungrateful daughter. Harrison's growing unease about Amber's presence in company operations led to several heated board meetings where he attempted to establish clearer boundaries around access to classified information. He argued that spouses shouldn't attend confidential briefings or have unrestricted access to secure areas, but Dad viewed these suggestions as betrayal from his oldest friend and business partner. The tension between them was destroying a partnership that had lasted over 15 years, and I could see how much it hurt Harrison to watch his best friend making choices that could endanger everything they'd built together. The final straw came when I discovered evidence that Amber had been accessing Dad's computer late at night, using password combinations she shouldn't have known to browse through sensitive files and communications with Pentagon officials. When I confronted her directly about this violation of security protocols, she turned the tables with masterful manipulation, claiming I was paranoid and jealous, desperate to destroy her marriage because I couldn't handle sharing Dad's attention with anyone else. That confrontation sealed my fate as the family troublemaker, and Dad's transformation from loving father to Amber's fierce protector became complete. He announced that my behavior had become unacceptable and that I needed to learn respect for the woman who'd brought joy back into his life after years of darkness and loss. The grounding that followed wasn't just punishment for questioning Amber's motives, it was the beginning of a systematic campaign to isolate me from family, friends, and any opportunity to expose what I was beginning to suspect was a much larger and more dangerous deception than simple gold digging. What started as a simple punishment for disrespecting Amber quickly evolved into something resembling house arrest under the guise of teaching me proper family values and respect for authority. Dad installed security cameras throughout the mansion, ostensibly to monitor my compliance with grounding restrictions, but I soon realized these surveillance devices were primarily positioned to track my movements and prevent any private conversations or activities that might threaten Amber's growing control over our household. The confiscation of my personal devices went far beyond typical parental discipline, extending to my laptop containing years of college research, my smartphone with contacts to friends and potential employers, and even my car keys, effectively trapping me within the estate grounds with no means of independent communication or transportation. Amber supervised this process personally, claiming that digital devices were corrupting my judgment and preventing me from focusing on family relationships, but her thoroughness in checking every account and password suggested motives far beyond moral guidance. Discovering that Amber had been intercepting my mail for months was perhaps the most chilling violation of privacy, revealing a level of surveillance and control that went far beyond anything Dad had authorized or even knew about. She'd been opening letters from Stanford, job applications, and personal correspondence, filtering information to create the impression that I was isolated, unemployed, and completely dependent on family support. Bank statements, credit card offers, and even medical correspondence had been diverted or destroyed, creating a paper trail that painted me as irresponsible and secretive. The planted evidence campaign began with small items that could be explained as misunderstandings or accidents, but gradually escalated to more serious accusations that damaged my credibility with Dad and our remaining household staff. Amber would discover her jewelry in my dresser drawers, cash missing from her purse that somehow appeared in my jacket pockets, and expensive cosmetics that she claimed I'd stolen during my jealous rages. Each incident was carefully documented with photos and timestamps, building a case file that portrayed me as a troubled young woman spiraling into criminal behavior. Dad's decision to install additional surveillance equipment throughout the house represented his complete acceptance of Amber's version of reality, where I'd become a dangerous presence requiring constant monitoring and control. Motion sensors were placed in hallways, recording devices appeared in common areas, and even the garden paths were equipped with cameras to track any attempts at unauthorized communication with the outside world. The technology was sophisticated and expensive, suggesting resources and expertise that went far beyond typical domestic security measures. The systematic firing of loyal household staff members who'd worked for our family for decades was presented as necessary cost-cutting, but I recognized it as elimination of potential witnesses and allies who might question Amber's rapid transformation of our home. Maria, our housekeeper who'd been with us since I was 8 years old, was dismissed for allegedly gossiping about family business, while James, our driver who'd served Dad faithfully for 12 years, was terminated for supposedly discussing confidential company matters with unauthorized personnel. Amber's campaign to erase my mother's presence from our home accelerated dramatically once she'd secured complete control over household decisions and Dad's emotional state. Family photographs spanning 3 generations of Montgomerys were systematically replaced with generic artwork and modern decorations that eliminated any trace of our family history or emotional connections to the past. Mom's garden, which had been her pride and joy during her final months, was redesigned into a stark geometric landscape that bore no resemblance to the warm, welcoming space where she'd found peace during her illness. The introduction of Victor as Amber's mysterious brother should have raised immediate security concerns given Dad's clearance level and access to classified information, but Dad was so thoroughly under her influence that he welcomed this dangerous stranger into our home without conducting even basic background checks. Victor was tall, angular, and spoke with a slight accent that didn't match Amber's supposed southern roots, but his presence was explained as temporary family support during a difficult transition period. Late-night conversations between Amber and Victor conducted in hushed tones and what sounded like Russian or another Eastern European language became increasingly frequent, but whenever I mentioned these observations to Dad, he dismissed them as misunderstanding or paranoid imagination. Their discussions often involved references to timelines, deadlines, and completion phases that sounded far more like business planning than family conversations, but my concerns were consistently invalidated and used as evidence of my deteriorating mental state. My attempt to escape the house and reach Harrison for help resulted in immediate recapture by security personnel who seemed to have been expecting such an attempt, suggesting that my movements were being predicted and tracked with professional efficiency. The punishment for this violation included threats of transfer to a military-style boarding school where my rebellious behavior could be properly addressed through discipline and structure, effectively ending any hopes of continuing my education or pursuing independent career goals. Harrison's subtle attempts to maintain contact and offer support were systematically blocked through a combination of technological interference and physical barriers that prevented any meaningful communication between us. Phone calls were intercepted, emails were filtered, and even his attempts to visit the house were discouraged through scheduling conflicts and security concerns that Amber orchestrated with remarkable skill. The isolation was becoming complete, cutting off my last remaining connection to allies who might question what was happening to our family. The escalation of security measures and punishment protocols was transforming our family home into a prison where every movement was monitored, every conversation was recorded, and every attempt at independence was met with swift retaliation. Dad's complete trust in Amber's judgment meant that her recommendations for handling my supposed behavioral problems were implemented without question, creating a system of control that would have been impossible to establish through traditional parental authority alone. The hidden passages in our century-old mansion had been my secret playground as a child, forgotten by most adults but perfectly remembered by someone desperate enough to risk everything for answers about what was really happening to my family. These narrow corridors and concealed staircases, originally designed for servants in an era of grand entertaining, provided the only means of movement through our house without triggering Amber's sophisticated surveillance network. The basement discovery that awaited me beyond a concealed door behind the old wine cellar revealed the true scope of Amber's operation and the professional nature of her deception. What had once been storage space for holiday decorations and forgotten furniture had been transformed into a high-tech command center equipped with multiple computer stations, professional-grade recording equipment, and communication devices that belonged in a government facility rather than a family residence. Banks of monitors displayed real-time feeds from cameras positioned throughout our house and Dad's office building, creating a comprehensive surveillance network that tracked every conversation and movement of potential targets. Hard drives labeled with dates and location codes contained gigabytes of recorded footage, audio files, and digital documents that represented months of systematic intelligence gathering. The sophistication of this equipment suggested resources and training far beyond anything a personal assistant or social climber could acquire independently. The classified Pentagon documents scattered across one workstation represented some of the most sensitive military cybersecurity information in existence, including encryption algorithms, security protocols, and access codes that could compromise national defense systems if they fell into the wrong hands. Seeing these top-secret files casually displayed next to coffee cups and notebooks revealed the breathtaking scope of the security breach that Amber had orchestrated through her manipulation of Dad's trust and emotions. Hidden among personal items in a locked drawer, I discovered passport documentation that revealed Amber's true identity as Anya Volkov, a former Russian intelligence operative with specialized training in industrial espionage and deep-cover infiltration operations. The photographs and biographical information painted a picture of someone with decades of experience in targeting defense contractors and government officials through romantic relationships and long-term psychological manipulation. The communications equipment in Amber's basement office was configured for encrypted international transmissions, with message logs revealing regular contact with handlers and coordinators across multiple time zones. References to other ongoing operations suggested that our family was just one target in a larger network of defense industry infiltration efforts designed to steal military technology and compromise national security infrastructure. Financial records discovered in encrypted files showed systematic theft of company funds through a complex network of shell corporations and offshore accounts, with transfers totaling millions of dollars that had been gradually diverted from Montgomery Innovations over the past 2 years. The sophistication of these financial crimes indicated coordination with professional money laundering operations and international criminal networks that specialized in industrial espionage. Phone recording devices hidden throughout Dad's office and our home had captured hundreds of hours of private conversations, business meetings, and confidential discussions with Pentagon officials and other defense contractors. These recordings represented a complete intelligence package that could be used to blackmail officials, compromise ongoing defense projects, and steal proprietary technology worth hundreds of millions of dollars on the international black market. The revelation that several of Dad's recent business decisions had been influenced or directly dictated by Amber's manipulation was perhaps the most devastating discovery, showing how completely she'd compromised his judgment and professional integrity. Meeting notes and recorded conversations revealed instances where she'd drugged his coffee or wine during critical negotiations, allowing her to access his computer systems and communication accounts while he was impaired. Evidence of Amber's systematic infiltration of other defense contractors became clear through files detailing similar operations targeting executives across the industry, suggesting that our family was part of a coordinated campaign to compromise multiple companies simultaneously. The scope of this espionage network was staggering, involving dozens of operatives and targeting billions of dollars worth of military contracts and classified information. The discovery that Victor was actually Amber's handler rather than her brother explained the increasing frequency of their meetings and the urgent tone of their encrypted communications. His role as operational coordinator meant that multiple espionage cells were reporting through him to higher-level intelligence services, making our family's situation part of a much larger international conspiracy against American defense capabilities. Hidden surveillance footage revealed that Amber had been photographing and copying classified documents for over 18 months, building a comprehensive library of military secrets that included everything from personnel files to technical specifications for advanced weapons systems. The volume of stolen information was so extensive that it represented one of the most successful espionage operations in recent history. When Amber discovered me in her basement command center, her transformation from loving stepmother to cold professional operative was instant and terrifying, revealing the calculated nature of her entire relationship with our family. The mask of warmth and vulnerability that she'd worn for 2 years disappeared completely, replaced by someone capable of violence and ruthless efficiency in protecting her mission objectives. Victor's threats against my life were delivered with casual professionalism that made it clear they'd eliminated obstacles before and wouldn't hesitate to do so again if I attempted to expose their operation. The realization that my father and I were expendable assets in a larger game of international espionage added urgency to my situation and made it clear that time was running out to prevent both personal tragedy and national security disaster. The old tunnel system beneath our mansion had been constructed during Prohibition for smuggling purposes but now served as my lifeline to the outside world, providing the only route past Amber's comprehensive surveillance network that monitored every conventional entrance and exit from our property. These forgotten passages connected to storm drains and maintenance tunnels that eventually emerged near the estate's perimeter, allowing me to reach public areas where encrypted communication with allies might be possible. Maya Rodriguez had been my roommate at Stanford and understood both my family situation and my technical capabilities better than anyone else still accessible to me during this crisis. Her graphic design firm specializing in corporate security consulting provided perfect cover for the type of encrypted communication networks we'd need to coordinate resistance efforts without detection by professional intelligence operatives. More importantly, her boyfriend worked in federal law enforcement and had connections to agencies investigating industrial espionage cases. Detective Sarah Walsh's reputation for investigating financial crimes and international conspiracy cases made her the ideal law enforcement contact for understanding the legal complexities of espionage operations and building cases that could survive defense by well-funded criminal organizations. Her preliminary investigation into similar cases revealed patterns of Russian intelligence services targeting defense contractors through long-term infiltration operations that had been ongoing for several years across multiple states. The discovery that Amber's operation was part of a larger FBI investigation provided both hope and additional danger, as it meant that federal agencies were aware of the threat but also that my family was considered acceptable collateral damage in a larger game of international espionage and national security. The challenge would be providing specific evidence that could accelerate law enforcement action before Amber's operation reached completion and eliminated potential witnesses. Gathering actionable evidence while maintaining the appearance of defeated compliance required acting skills I'd never needed before, convincing professional intelligence operatives that I'd abandoned all resistance and accepted my role as powerless victim of circumstances beyond my control. Every interaction with Amber and Victor had to reinforce their assessment that I posed no threat to their timeline while I secretly documented their activities and communications. The close calls became increasingly frequent as Amber's paranoia about security breaches led to more sophisticated counter-surveillance measures and psychological pressure designed to break down my remaining resistance. Random searches of my room, surprise interrogations about my activities, and calculated emotional manipulation were all employed to maintain psychological dominance and detect any signs of ongoing opposition to their control. Harrison's secret assistance in accessing company financial records required elaborate coordination to avoid detection by the surveillance systems monitoring both our communications and his movements around Montgomery Innovations. His position as Dad's business partner provided legitimate access to sensitive information, but any unusual activity or document requests would immediately trigger security alerts that could expose our investigation. The revelation that other defense contractors had been compromised by similar operations added urgency to our evidence gathering, as it suggested that Amber's network was preparing for simultaneous strikes against multiple targets that could compromise national security on an unprecedented scale. The scope of the threat meant that personal vengeance was less important than preventing damage to military capabilities and protecting other families from similar infiltration. Amber's increasing paranoia about my changed behavior led to escalated surveillance and more direct threats of violence, with Victor making it clear that my cooperation was no longer optional and that any perceived resistance would result in immediate elimination. The psychological pressure of maintaining false compliance while secretly working against trained intelligence operatives was exhausting and required constant vigilance to avoid behavioral mistakes that would expose our operation. The failed attempt to drug me during dinner represented a significant escalation in their timeline and suggested that they were preparing to eliminate both Dad and me once the Pentagon contract was secured and their primary objectives were achieved. The drug's effects were subtle enough that casual observation wouldn't detect impairment, but would have rendered me unconscious long enough for elimination to appear accidental or self-inflicted. Sarah's provision of hidden recording equipment required careful integration into my daily routine without triggering detection by professional counter-surveillance measures that Victor and Amber had undoubtedly implemented throughout our house. The devices needed to capture high-quality audio evidence while remaining undetectable during regular security sweeps and personal searches that had become standard procedure. The coordination of evidence gathering with the Pentagon contract timeline created additional pressure, as we had to document criminal activity and build prosecutable cases before Amber's operation reached completion and triggered elimination protocols for witnesses. The narrow window between final evidence gathering and operational completion meant that any delays or mistakes could result in both personal catastrophe and national security disaster. The psychological toll of maintaining false compliance while secretly working against people who demonstrated willingness to commit violence was becoming increasingly difficult to sustain, particularly given the isolation from normal support systems and the constant threat of discovery. Every conversation had to be carefully managed to reinforce their assessment of my defeated state while gathering intelligence needed to stop their operation. The performance required to convince professional intelligence operatives that I'd genuinely surrendered all resistance demanded acting abilities I'd never possessed, requiring complete emotional transformation from determined opposition to broken compliance that would satisfy trained observers skilled in detecting deception. Every gesture, expression, and word had to reinforce their assessment that psychological pressure had achieved its intended result and eliminated me as a potential threat to their operational security. Amber's acceptance of my apparent breakdown was cautious but gradually became more confident as days passed without any sign of continued resistance or attempts to communicate with outside allies, allowing her to focus attention on final preparations for the Pentagon contract completion rather than continued surveillance of neutralized threats. This shift in her priorities created opportunities for evidence gathering that wouldn't have been possible while under maximum scrutiny. The elaborate coordination required to time our evidence collection with critical moments in Amber's operation without triggering professional counter-surveillance measures demanded precise scheduling and flawless execution from multiple parties working with limited communication capabilities. Maya's technical expertise in secure communications and Sarah's law enforcement experience in timing arrests became essential elements in preventing operational disaster. Victor's surveillance of Harrison as a potential security threat revealed the extent of their professional paranoia and willingness to eliminate anyone who might interfere with mission completion, making it clear that all potential allies were at risk until final arrests could be executed. His background surveillance included detailed behavioral analysis, financial investigation, and assessment of psychological vulnerabilities that could be exploited if direct elimination became necessary. The discovery of Amber's overconfidence during what she believed was a celebration of successful mission completion provided the perfect opportunity to capture admissions of criminal activity and future intentions that would be essential for prosecution of espionage charges. Her relaxed security during these private moments with Victor allowed recording devices to capture conversations that revealed the full scope of their operation. Harrison's apparent betrayal when he seemed to align himself with Amber's interests was devastating on a personal level but proved to be masterful acting that convinced professional operatives of his compliance while secretly coordinating with federal authorities. His ability to maintain deep cover while surrounded by trained intelligence agents demonstrated skills I hadn't known he possessed and provided crucial intelligence about final operational timelines. The revelation that Harrison had been working as a double agent with FBI coordination since the early stages of the investigation explained his access to resources and information that wouldn't have been available to ordinary business partners or family friends. His position provided law enforcement with inside access to Amber's operation while maintaining plausible deniability about official involvement until evidence gathering was complete. Victor's violent response to suspicions about potential security breaches demonstrated the level of professional paranoia and willingness to use extreme measures that characterized their entire operation, making it clear that discovery would result in immediate elimination of all potential witnesses. His background in military intelligence included training in torture and assassination techniques that made him extremely dangerous when operational security was threatened. The emergency intervention by Sarah's tactical team prevented immediate violence but risked exposing the entire investigation if Amber and Victor realized that law enforcement had been monitoring their activities and building cases against their network. The timing had to be perfect to prevent both personal harm and compromise of the larger investigation into international espionage operations. Amber's realization that she'd been discovered triggered immediate implementation of contingency plans that included destroying evidence, eliminating witnesses, and executing emergency extraction procedures that would allow her to escape prosecution and continue operations elsewhere. Her training in intelligence operations included extensive preparation for situations where cover was blown and immediate evacuation became necessary. The acceleration of their timeline for final theft of classified information meant that the Pentagon contract signing would become the focal point for both completing their espionage mission and implementing elimination protocols for family members who'd become liabilities. The pressure of compressed schedules increased the likelihood of mistakes while also creating maximum danger for everyone involved in the operation. Richard's continued obliviousness to the danger surrounding him despite increasingly obvious signs of criminal activity demonstrated how completely professional psychological manipulation had compromised his judgment and perception of reality. His plans to grant Amber power of attorney would have provided her with complete legal control over both personal and corporate assets, facilitating theft on an even larger scale. The final confrontation was inevitable as all parties prepared for the Pentagon presentation that would determine whether months of preparation resulted in successful espionage or catastrophic exposure, with personal survival and national security hanging in the balance. The complexity of coordinating law enforcement action with evidence preservation while protecting civilian lives required precision that allowed no margin for error or miscommunication. The morning of the Pentagon contract signing arrived with deceptive normalcy, as Amber maintained her facade of devoted wife preparing to support her husband during the most important business presentation of his career, while secretly coordinating final intelligence theft and witness elimination protocols with Victor and their overseas handlers. Her attention to detail and maintaining cover extended to preparing Dad's favorite breakfast and discussing celebration dinner plans that she knew would never happen. The FBI raids began during the height of the Pentagon presentation, with federal agents simultaneously executing search warrants at Montgomery Innovations, our family mansion, and multiple locations connected to Amber's espionage network across several states. The coordination required to prevent destruction of evidence while protecting civilian lives and maintaining operational security represented one of the largest domestic counterintelligence operations in recent years. Richard's public humiliation during the raid was devastating to witness, as federal agents interrupted his presentation to high-ranking military officials with announcements that he was under investigation for security breaches and potential espionage activities. The destruction of his professional reputation was immediate and complete, as news of the investigation spread through defense industry networks within hours of the initial arrests. Amber's desperate attempt to frame me as the real security threat backfired spectacularly when FBI agents produced hours of recorded conversations revealing her true identity, operational objectives, and detailed plans for eliminating family members once the mission was complete. Her transformation from victim to perpetrator was captured on federal recording equipment that provided irrefutable evidence of her criminal activities. Victor's violent attack on Harrison during the chaos of multiple simultaneous arrests demonstrated the level of professional training and willingness to fight that characterized foreign intelligence operatives, requiring tactical response teams to subdue someone with extensive military combat experience and weapons expertise. His resistance to arrest resulted in serious injuries to multiple law enforcement officers and revealed the true danger that our family had been living with for months. The media frenzy that erupted around the story of Russian espionage penetrating American defense contractors created a national security scandal that dominated news cycles for weeks and triggered congressional investigations into security clearance procedures and foreign intelligence threats. Our family's private tragedy became public entertainment as reporters competed for exclusive interviews and inside information about the operation. Amber's final manipulation attempt involved claiming that her relationship with Dad had been genuine and that she'd been trying to protect him from my mental instability and threats against his business empire, but the extensive evidence of premeditated espionage and planned violence made these claims transparently false to investigators and prosecutors. Her training in psychological manipulation continued even under arrest, as she attempted to convince interrogators of her victimhood. The devastating realization of betrayal hit Dad with such force that he suffered what appeared to be a complete psychological breakdown, unable to process how thoroughly he'd been deceived by someone he'd trusted with his life, his business, and his family's future. The scope of manipulation became clear as investigators revealed how every aspect of their relationship had been carefully orchestrated to achieve maximum vulnerability and control. The confrontation between Dad and me in the aftermath of revelations was emotionally brutal but necessary for beginning the process of healing relationships that had been systematically poisoned by professional psychological warfare. Years of manipulation had created artificial conflicts and destroyed natural family bonds that would require extensive effort to rebuild, but the foundation of love remained intact beneath the damage. The international incident created by Amber's arrest and exposure of her intelligence network triggered diplomatic protests and demands for explanations that strained relationships between the United States and Russia at the highest levels of government. The successful penetration of defense contractors raised serious questions about security procedures and foreign intelligence capabilities that required immediate policy changes. Montgomery Innovations faced immediate suspension of all government contracts pending completion of security investigations that would determine the extent of compromised information and assess damage to national defense capabilities. The company's survival depended on cooperating fully with federal investigators while attempting to salvage relationships with clients who'd lost confidence in their security procedures and personnel screening. Victor's escape during the chaos of multiple arrests meant that a dangerous foreign intelligence operative with detailed knowledge of American defense systems and ongoing operations remained at large, creating ongoing security concerns for law enforcement and intelligence agencies. His training and resources made recapture extremely difficult and meant that threats against our family could continue indefinitely. Harrison's hospitalization after Victor's assault revealed the extent of physical damage inflicted by someone trained in combat techniques designed to inflict maximum injury in minimum time, requiring extensive surgery and rehabilitation that would affect his ability to participate in rebuilding efforts for months. His sacrifice in protecting critical evidence demonstrated courage and loyalty that went far beyond business partnership or friendship. The complete breakdown of Richard's business empire represented not just personal financial disaster but the destruction of everything he'd worked to build over decades of dedicated effort and innovation in cybersecurity technology. The psychological impact of losing life's work through manipulation and betrayal was potentially more devastating than any financial losses or legal consequences he might face. The FBI's forensic investigation into 3 years of systematic theft and espionage revealed a level of professional sophistication and international coordination that shocked even experienced counterintelligence agents familiar with foreign operations targeting American defense capabilities. Computer forensic specialists discovered that Amber had accessed virtually every classified system at Montgomery Innovations, copying terabytes of sensitive data that included personnel files, technical specifications, and strategic planning documents worth hundreds of millions of dollars on the international black market. Richard faced potential criminal charges ranging from negligent handling of classified materials to willful violation of security protocols, with federal prosecutors arguing that his personal relationship with a foreign agent represented either criminal conspiracy or such reckless disregard for security that it constituted a federal crime. The legal distinction between victim and accomplice became critically important for determining whether Dad would face prison time or simply lose his security clearance and business empire. The bankruptcy proceedings for Montgomery Innovations began within weeks of the arrests, as government contracts were terminated and private clients fled from association with a company that had been so thoroughly compromised by foreign intelligence. Assets were frozen pending resolution of criminal cases, employee pension funds were threatened, and decades of research and development were essentially worthless due to security contamination. Federal court testimony required me to relive months of psychological manipulation and threats while defense attorneys attempted to portray me as an unreliable witness whose mental state had been compromised by family stress and personal jealousy. The pressure of testifying against trained intelligence operatives who understood courtroom psychology and manipulation tactics was exhausting and required extensive preparation with prosecution teams. The discovery of additional victims as Amber's network was exposed revealed that similar operations had been ongoing across the country, targeting defense contractors, government officials, and technology companies with access to sensitive information that could benefit foreign intelligence services. The scope of the coordinated espionage campaign was staggering, involving dozens of operatives and compromising billions of dollars worth of military and civilian technology. Media coverage transformed our family tragedy into national entertainment, with reporters competing for exclusive interviews and inside information that often prioritized sensational details over accuracy or consideration for ongoing legal proceedings. Richard was portrayed alternately as either a criminal mastermind or a pathetic fool, with little acknowledgement of the sophisticated psychological warfare that had been employed against him. The seizure of family assets during the investigation forced us to leave our mansion and live in a modest apartment while courts determined what property was legitimately owned versus what had been purchased with stolen funds or used to facilitate criminal activities. The financial devastation was compounded by legal fees, security expenses, and loss of income from Dad's destroyed business empire. Amber's trial became a showcase for the prosecution's case against international espionage, with testimony revealing the extent of her training, the sophistication of her cover identity, and the detailed planning that had gone into targeting our family specifically. The evidence included thousands of recorded conversations, financial records showing systematic theft, and testimony from other intelligence operatives who agreed to cooperate with prosecutors. Victor's capture while attempting to flee the country provided additional evidence about the international scope of the operation and revealed connections to other espionage networks that had been operating in the United States for years. His cooperation with authorities was minimal, but the intelligence gathered from his arrest led to additional investigations and the exposure of other foreign agents embedded in American institutions. Richard's suicide attempt occurred during the darkest period of our ordeal, when the full extent of his manipulation became clear and he realized how completely he'd betrayed everything he'd worked to build through his relationship with Amber. The psychological trauma of discovering that years of love and trust had been weaponized against him and his family was almost too much for him to survive. My decision to take control of our family's remaining assets and fight for Dad's vindication represented a fundamental shift in our relationship, as I assumed responsibilities for legal strategy, media management, and financial planning that had always been his domain. The role reversal was difficult for both of us, but necessity demanded that I become his advocate and protector during his psychological recovery. Harrison's slow recovery from Victor's assault was complicated by ongoing threats from remnants of the espionage network who viewed him as a continuing security risk due to his cooperation with federal authorities. The physical and psychological trauma of his attack required extensive therapy and security measures that affected every aspect of his life. Sarah's promotion within federal law enforcement was well-deserved recognition for her role in exposing a major espionage operation, but also meant that she became a valuable resource for understanding ongoing threats and helping our family navigate the complex legal and security challenges that would continue for years after the initial arrests. The legal battles over intellectual property theft continued for months as prosecutors attempted to determine exactly what information had been compromised and calculate damages to national security that could be attributed to Amber's operation. The complexity of cybersecurity technology made damage assessment extremely difficult and expensive. My transformation from protected daughter to fierce advocate for Dad's vindication required learning skills I'd never needed before, including media management, legal strategy coordination, and public relations campaigns designed to distinguish between victims and perpetrators in complex espionage cases. The challenge was convincing a skeptical public that someone with Dad's intelligence and experience could have been so thoroughly deceived by professional psychological warfare. The strategic media campaign developed with Maya's expertise focused on educating the public about the sophisticated techniques used by foreign intelligence services to target and manipulate American citizens, particularly those with access to sensitive information or critical infrastructure. Our goal was to shift the narrative from personal blame to recognition of professional espionage threats that any family could face. Congressional hearings provided an opportunity for me to testify about the systematic targeting of defense contractors and the need for improved security protocols that could protect both national security and the families of people working in sensitive industries. The testimony was emotionally difficult but politically important for building support for legislative changes that could prevent similar operations. Amber's life sentence after conviction on multiple charges of espionage, conspiracy to commit murder, fraud, and violation of the Foreign Agents Registration Act provided some measure of justice, but couldn't restore the damage to our family's relationships and Dad's lifetime of work. The legal victory was important for national security but felt hollow given the personal costs we'd paid. Victor's cooperation with federal authorities after his capture revealed the broader scope of Russian intelligence operations targeting American defense capabilities, leading to additional arrests and the exposure of espionage networks that had been operating for years without detection. His testimony was crucial for understanding how foreign intelligence services recruit and manage long-term infiltration operations. Richard's gradual recovery required extensive therapy and medication to address the psychological trauma of realizing how completely he'd been manipulated by someone he'd loved and trusted completely. The process of rebuilding his sense of reality and judgment was slow and painful, but essential for any hope of personal or professional rehabilitation. The rebuilding of our father-daughter relationship required honest acknowledgement of how Amber's manipulation had damaged our communication and trust, creating artificial conflicts that had nearly destroyed the natural love and respect we'd always shared. The healing process was complicated by guilt, anger, and mutual forgiveness that had to be worked through carefully with professional guidance. Harrison's return to help salvage what remained of Montgomery Innovations' technology and intellectual property was motivated by both friendship and recognition that some of Dad's innovations could still benefit national security if properly protected and developed. His recovery from Victor's assault was incomplete but sufficient to allow limited involvement in reconstruction efforts. Sarah's continued friendship and professional guidance provided ongoing security consultation and emotional support as our family learned to navigate life under constant threat from foreign intelligence services that viewed us as potential ongoing risks or targets for recruitment. The friendship that had developed during the crisis became an important element of our new normal. The discovery of other families who'd been torn apart by similar espionage operations led to advocacy work focused on supporting victims of foreign intelligence operations and improving security awareness among defense industry families. The shared experiences created a community of survivors who understood the unique challenges of recovering from professional psychological warfare. My advocacy for improved security protocols in defense contracting resulted in legislative changes requiring additional background checks, psychological evaluation, and monitoring of family members with access to classified information. The goal was preventing future operations while protecting the privacy and dignity of military families and defense industry workers. The partial financial recovery through insurance claims and government compensation programs provided some stability but couldn't replace the lifetime of work and innovation that had been destroyed by Amber's operation. The financial rehabilitation was important for practical reasons but secondary to personal and emotional healing. The establishment of a new business venture focused on counterintelligence consulting allowed Dad to apply his experience as an espionage victim to help other companies and families protect themselves against similar threats. The work provided purpose and meaning while contributing to national security in a different way than his previous career. Richard's public speaking about psychological manipulation and espionage threats became an important part of his healing process while also providing valuable education for audiences who might be vulnerable to similar operations. His willingness to share personal experiences helped other victims and improved public awareness of foreign intelligence threats. The ongoing legal victories against remnants of Amber's network provided continued vindication and closure as additional operatives were arrested and prosecuted for their roles in the broader espionage campaign. Each successful prosecution reinforced the fact that our family had been victims rather than willing participants in criminal activities. 2 years after the arrests that shattered our world and rebuilt it from fragments of truth and determination, Dad and I have constructed a new relationship based on hard-earned wisdom about the dangers of manipulation and the importance of honest communication in protecting family bonds against professional psychological warfare. The healing process required acknowledging how thoroughly Amber had poisoned our natural trust and love while refusing to let her final victory be the permanent destruction of our family connections. Montgomery Security Consulting emerged from the ashes of Dad's original company as a specialized firm dedicated to helping corporations and government agencies protect against the exact type of infiltration and espionage that had destroyed our previous life, turning our painful experience into valuable expertise that could prevent others from suffering similar devastating betrayals. Our client list includes Fortune 500 companies, defense contractors, and federal agencies seeking guidance on security protocols that address both technological vulnerabilities and human psychological weaknesses. The business partnership with Maya's design firm has evolved into a comprehensive security consulting operation that combines her expertise in communication systems with our hard-won knowledge of espionage techniques and counterintelligence procedures. Her technical skills and creative problem-solving abilities complement our understanding of how foreign intelligence services target and manipulate American families and businesses. Richard's marriage to Catherine Williams, a longtime family friend who had known and loved my mother, represented a healthy relationship built on genuine shared history rather than calculated deception designed to exploit vulnerability and isolation. Catherine's patient support during Dad's recovery and her respect for our family's complicated past provided the stable foundation necessary for true healing and growth. Harrison's recovery from Victor's assault was slower and more complicated than initially expected, but his determination to rebuild both his physical capabilities and professional expertise created opportunities for romantic relationships that had been impossible during the crisis period of investigation and legal proceedings. Our relationship developed naturally from shared trauma and mutual respect into genuine love and partnership that honored our individual experiences while creating new possibilities for the future. The annual speaking engagements at corporate security conferences, congressional briefings, and public awareness events provide opportunities to share our experience with audiences who need to understand how sophisticated espionage operations target ordinary families and destroy lives through patience, planning, and professional psychological manipulation. The educational mission helps other potential victims recognize warning signs while contributing to national security awareness. Sarah's continued friendship and professional guidance as she advanced through federal law enforcement ranks provided ongoing security consultation and personal support as we learned to navigate life under constant awareness that foreign intelligence services might view our family as potential targets for recruitment, retaliation, or elimination. Her expertise and friendship became invaluable resources for maintaining both safety and sanity. The annual Memorial Scholarship established in my mother's name provides funding for cybersecurity students who demonstrate both technical excellence and personal integrity necessary for protecting American defense capabilities against foreign threats. The scholarship honors Mom's memory while contributing to the next generation of professionals who will defend our country against increasingly sophisticated espionage operations. The sale of our family mansion provided both practical financial resources and symbolic closure of the chapter of our lives that had been contaminated by Amber's presence and Victor's threats, allowing us to invest in new homes and business ventures that represented fresh starts rather than renovation of poisoned spaces. The proceeds funded victim advocacy organizations and security research initiatives that extended the positive impact of our survival. Richard's memoir about psychological manipulation in espionage operations became a bestseller that educated millions of readers about the sophisticated techniques used by foreign intelligence services while providing income that supported our family's financial recovery and funded additional security research. The book's success demonstrated public hunger for understanding threats that many Americans face without recognizing the dangers. The victim advocacy organization we established helps other families navigate the legal, financial, and emotional challenges of recovering from espionage operations and foreign intelligence manipulation, providing resources and support that weren't available during our own crisis but that could make recovery faster and more complete for future victims. The organization also lobbies for legislative changes that protect families while maintaining necessary security protocols. Looking back on the devastation that Amber and Victor brought into our lives, I'm struck by how completely they underestimated our capacity for resilience, growth, and transformation in the face of their professional attempts to destroy our family through betrayal and manipulation. Their expertise in psychological warfare was impressive, but they failed to account for the fundamental strength of genuine love and the power of truth to eventually overcome even the most sophisticated deception. The experience taught us that family bonds built on authentic love and shared values can survive almost any assault, but only if we're willing to acknowledge damage honestly and work deliberately to rebuild trust and communication that's been compromised by outside interference. Professional psychological manipulation is designed to exploit natural human vulnerabilities, but it can't permanently destroy relationships that are based on genuine care and mutual respect. Our new life isn't better or worse than what we had before, but it's more honest about the real dangers that exist in our world and more appreciative of the genuine connections that make survival and recovery possible when everything else is stripped away by tragedy and betrayal. We've learned to value truth over comfort and authentic relationships over social convenience, lessons that make us stronger and more capable of protecting what really matters. Has your family ever faced situations where someone seemed too good to be true, and how did you handle those red flags? Share your thoughts in the comments below because your experiences might help other families recognize dangerous situations before they escalate. If this story opened your eyes to the realities of modern espionage and family manipulation, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe for more true stories about overcoming impossible odds and finding strength in the darkest moments. Thank you for joining me on this journey through betrayal, discovery, and ultimate redemption. Remember that no matter how dark things seem, there's always hope for healing and justice when we refuse to give up on truth and family. Stay safe, stay vigilant, and never underestimate the power of love to overcome even the most sophisticated attempts to destroy what matters most.